There are a bunch of outstanding videos online that show you how to fix scapular winging. And in this video, I'm going to give you a powerful tip that you can apply to pretty much any serratus anterior exercise to ensure you're effectively targeting and strengthening this muscle. And this will allow you to ensure that you get rid of any scapular winging and ensure that you keep your shoulder girdle healthy, strong, and pain-free. Now, you know how it goes. Timestamps are in the description below so you can jump around because I respect your time. But if you can, watch this video from start to finish so you can stack it all together and get the most out of it. So real quick, scapular winging refers to a condition involving the shoulder where the shoulder blade protrudes or sticks out abnormally from the back instead of lying flat against the rib cage. Now, there's a lot that goes into what causes scapular winging and what's involved with the issue, which isn't the focus of this video. For the purposes of this video, you simply need to be aware that it can lead to issues within the shoulder and upper back that causes pain and dysfunctional movement, and so it's a condition worth eliminating. So here's the deal. The serratus anterior is a muscle that runs from the underside of your shoulder blade and attaches down onto your ribs, typically ribs 1 through 9. Its primary action is to produce shoulder protraction, which is the forward and outward movement of the shoulder blade along the rib cage away from the spine. Now, in the real world, the body moves through movement patterns and utilizes groups of muscles to carry out movement. But there are times, particularly with rehabilitation exercises, where it's often more ideal to avoid using groups of muscles if possible, and instead try to drive most of the effort to the injured or weak muscle that needs to be strengthened. And this is simply because when it comes to injury rehabilitation of an individual muscle or targeted strengthening of an individual muscle, the more we can isolate and confine the challenge to the muscle that we're looking to target, the more effective the exercise will likely be. And in this case, we want to do this for the serratus anterior muscle. So to target the serratus anterior, we typically need resistance applied to our shoulder while we try to produce shoulder protraction, since this challenges the muscle, which ultimately makes it become stronger. Now, you might not need resistance depending on your particular condition. Sometimes the weight of your arm against gravity can be enough. But for most people, for the target audience of this video, we might need some type of resistance. But here's the secret sauce. When we produce shoulder protraction, the big, powerful pectoralis major and its smaller, less popular brother, the pectoralis minor, will help assist with this movement. Now, serratus anterior is still firing up to some extent, but if the pectoral muscles are dominating here and essentially taking over, then the serratus anterior won't be challenged to an ideal extent, getting off easy, if you will. And this can lead to an ineffective stimulus being driven to the serratus anterior, perhaps making your strengthening exercises less effective, especially if you're trying to fix scapular winging. And again, to be perfectly clear, in the regular world of everyday movement, our brain orchestrates movement by recruiting groups of muscles to produce movement, which is good. But this can work against us if we're trying to isolate and target an individual muscle, in this case, the serratus anterior. So oftentimes in these rehabilitative circumstances, it can be extremely helpful to learn how to dissociate activation of the pectoralis muscles from the serratus anterior. Okay, and here's your secret sauce. The general concept of movement dissociation means we're training the brain how to neurologically move specific body parts or segments independently from others. In this particular case, we're training the brain to dissociate muscle contractions so that we can protract the shoulder by utilizing the serratus anterior muscle while keeping the pectoralis muscles from firing up. Now, achieving this is kind of like riding a bicycle. You might struggle for the first bit, but once your brain figures it out, it becomes almost thoughtless or effortless to do. And once you can do this, serratus anterior strengthening and rehabilitation often goes through the roof. And the beauty here is that if you master this muscle dissociation, you can apply it to just about any serratus anterior exercise that you've seen or perhaps have already been doing. An overly simplistic example of this whole movement dissociation thing would be bending your elbow. Now, when you do so, your brain knows how to keep your wrist muscles relaxed so you don't curl your wrist each time your brain tells you to bend your elbow. And this separation of wrist flexing muscles to your biceps muscles is dissociation. And that's essentially what we need to do here when it comes to dissociating movement between your serratus anterior and your pectoral muscles. So here's a typical progression I often use with many of my patients and athletes when working to optimize their serratus function as a means to help with scapular winging and improve overall shoulder girdle function. It all starts with placing your hand on a wall or a post and then taking your opposite hand and placing it around your pectoral muscle and giving it a gentle squeeze. The reason for your hand lightly grabbing your pectoral muscle is so that you can feel if this muscle becomes tense throughout the upcoming movement, meaning that it is contracting. So in the starting position, you now slowly push your body away from the wall. And if you feel your pectoral muscle tense up at any point, reset and try again. Remember, right now, you're not trying to do this so much as to strengthen the muscle, but rather to simply teach your brain how to protract your shoulder with the serratus anterior and not your pectoral muscles. And again, it can be tricky to learn at first, but once your brain figures it out, you'll be able to protract with very minimal amounts of pectoral activation. Once you're able to dissociate serratus contraction from pectoral muscle contraction, you can certainly go on to apply this tactic with any of your preferred serratus anterior exercises. However, there is an intermediate step that I often give those whom I work with to help ensure that they can not only dissociate movement, but that they can then keep their serratus muscle fired up at all times before progressing to more traditional exercises. So keep on watching if you want to learn about the concept of scapular leaking. Now, real quick, if you appreciate that you're watching content put together by a real human being and not watching some AI slop with a computer-generated voice, then please consider hitting the like button. Now, I'm actually not all that comfortable in front of a camera, but I want to help others with these rehabilitative concepts as best as I can, and I simply refuse to be a faceless channel with an overused generic AI voice. And so if you think that's cool and you want to help spread the word about coming back stronger from injuries, liking and subscribing to this channel would mean the absolute world to me. All right, the concept of scapular leaking. Now, this isn't really an official term by any means, but it's one that my colleagues and I often use when we find that people are starting to learn this whole movement dissociation thing between the serratus muscle and the pectoral muscles. And that's because what we find is that when they're learning to engage the serratus without the pectoral muscles firing up, that in the process, they often struggle to hold a strong contraction for a handful of seconds from the serratus muscle without it actually starting to slowly decrease in the amount of its contraction. We often observe this by making them hold a maximally protracted shoulder position, and then over a handful of seconds, we see if their shoulder protraction slowly decreases either by a little or by a lot. Think of it like a tire or a balloon that is slowly deflating. The more the shoulder is protracted, the more inflated the tire or the balloon is. As protraction slowly decreases and your upper body therefore collapses towards the wall, it's like air is leaking out of the tire or balloon. But in the case of the serratus muscle, the amount of air leaking out refers to the intensity of muscle contraction slowly decreasing. So once you can hold your shoulder in a protracted state for about 20 or 30 seconds without a whisper of this leaking taking place, then you've now set the stage for the next level of strengthening tactics. So again, there's no shortage of effective exercises to rehabilitate your serratus muscle. But I figured if you've made it this far into the video, then I should show you one of my personal favorites. And I really like it because you can challenge the serratus muscle with different vectors of movement while easily fine-tuning the amount of resistance that you use. So here's how it works. Take a piece of TheraBand and tie a handle on one end, and then lay on a bench or table or the floor so that you can pin the band down with your back. And you can fine-tune the resistance by choosing where you lay on the band. The closer you lay towards the handle end, the more resistance you'll create, and vice versa. You could also do this while leaning up against a wall if you wanted to. And from there, you can opt to place your free hand over your pectoral muscle if you'd like, and from there, you can push your hand directly up towards the ceiling. Again, try to do so while minimizing how much contraction comes from your pectoral muscle. And this straight upwards direction works quite nicely, but you can also perform these serratus anterior punches at slightly different angles as well. Doing this in these different directions might just allow you to squeeze a bit more extra rehabilitation out of this exercise by helping to ensure that your serratus anterior can properly engage while your shoulder girdle is protracting at slightly different angles. Now, again, one of the reasons why I like this exercise so much is that when you perform it, you'll be able to minimize pectoral activation. Now, once you start to move to heavier loads, such as when supporting your body weight, you'll start noticing that your pectoral muscles will have no choice but to engage. So these dissociation exercises are typically done with lighter to moderate resistance loads. Again, as you move to movements more like bench press with heavier loads, it's not about dissociation of movement at that point in time. That then becomes more of the functional strengthening where we're not trying to isolate muscles. So there you have it, movement dissociation with serratus anterior activation. Just a simple little concept you can employ to get a bit more out of your shoulder girdle rehab. Now, again, don't get frustrated if you can't dissociate the movement right away. It may take a bit of time and practice, but once you get it, you will likely feel just how big of a difference it truly makes for putting your serratus anterior to work. With that being said, you know how it goes. Keep looking after yourselves, keep looking after one another, keep making great things happen, and I'll see you in the next video.